Hi everyone, thank you. This is the first presentation in your Wednesday PD Elementary Distance Learning Instructional Model. This is kind of the overview presentation of how distance learning would look if we go to distance learning in the future. My name is Lana Peterson. I work for the University of Minnesota in the Curriculum Instruction Department. We have been research practice partners with Austin Public Schools for 7 years now. It's been an amazing partnership. But this presentation is actually more of a collaborative effort. I'm the presenter, but there's been admin, coaches, distance learning teachers, partner districts, and research that has all come in to design what you are about to see today. So just as an overview of what we're going to cover today, the first is what distance learning 2.0 would actually look like. What are your core tools for delivering distance learning? What are some best or effective practices? And then how to build digital literacy for both you and your students after this. First, I just want to take a moment to pause and acknowledge that there is a lot going on, and watching this presentation might be creating some anxiety in you. But I just want to state out loud that we truly do not know if we will transition to distance learning, but of course we want to be proactive in the idea that we might. And so I don't want anybody to think that we are immediately going to distance learning, but of course we just want to make sure that you have the skills and knowledge to do so. The next moment of pause is that technology for almost everybody, including me and my degrees in technology, can be super anxiety producing. And so as some of this information is being presented to you, you might have this feeling of just like wanting to shut down, feeling overwhelmed. And I want you to know that that is completely normal. And just like we would encourage our students to take a break, take a breath, take a walk. If you need to take a break in this presentation or any presentation after that, please do so. But know that what you're feeling is completely normal, and it's on top of a lot of heaviness that this year has brought as well. Connected to that, there is a lot going on. Teachers are sharing that this has been the most work that they've ever done, and they're not even in distance learning. It's just so many things to navigate. We're living through a pandemic. It's a big election year. There's a lot of divisiveness. I do not mean this in a patronizing way whatsoever, but you really have to give yourself a pat on the back for everything that you have achieved thus far. The amount of change that is happening in a very short time can be super traumatizing for people. Normally, this amount of change would happen over years, but it's happening a lot faster. And so at any point in time, just give yourself a little bit of credit for everything that you're doing and know that you are amazing. Your students need you. You are doing so awesome. And thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. So what would distance learning 2.0 look like? There's kind of 3 core components that we want to talk about. The first is that our whole group lessons, our at grade level, reading level lessons would be delivered daily via Seesaw. And again, don't get overwhelmed by this. We're going to go into the details of this, but students will receive 3 to 4 lessons developed in Seesaw to their inboxes at 9 a.m. each morning. The second component would be that we would have live sessions via Teams. And last year in distance learning, there wasn't as many live sessions. We didn't have the structure set up, but now the district is getting one-to-one iPads for the elementary. We have the Wi-Fi cards. We want to give that opportunity for the live sessions. We use the word opportunity because we do not want to require any live meetings with students. Access is just not always there. The support is not always there to get online, but we want to provide the opportunities. And third, a more structured schedule to support 1 and 2 would need to be provided, especially to ensure that students are receiving their EL services, they're receiving their SPED services, and that teachers, you have adequate prep time and boundaries. Okay. So let's dive into that first thing, whole group via Seesaw. Students will receive 3 to 4 lessons per day via Seesaw. Okay, so These lessons would be a combination of videos and rich activities within Seesaw, and we'll have more sessions on Seesaw that you can access after this, and they would get those lessons Monday through Friday. The first one would be a language arts lesson, a whole group lesson and activity created by teachers. It could be you or a collaboration with others. There was some talk about having a group of teachers create these lessons for the whole district, but because there's so much variation between buildings, it's just not feasible. But once we get to the schedule, we'll be very clear about when you would have time to develop these lessons. The next is whole group math lessons and rich activity as well. There is a group of people who are going to be building some resources for you to support you in developing these math lessons. And then the third and fourth would have more flexibility. So it might be, depending on how your building does a schedule, that a specialist sends out a lesson. It could be that students receive EL or SPED services, and so that they would get an asynchronous lesson or a flipped lesson to their Seesaw inbox from that specialist. And it could be a writing lesson, social studies lesson, or it could be asking them as an activity to go to one of the subscription platforms. And again, each building within Austin has different subscriptions, but asking them to do some time on there and then just asking them to self-reflect. Did they spend that time on IXL? The next is the live sessions via Teams. So students, again, will have the opportunity to participate in 3 live sessions per day, Monday through Thursday, and then 1 live session on Friday. These meetings should prioritize community building, social emotional education, and active engagement, which means that students should not be on a live meeting and go too many minutes without having the opportunity to raise their hand, contribute to the conversation, talk with peers, maybe go into breakout rooms. Synchronous meetings will happen Monday through Friday, will be whole group meeting, and that's that community building, checking in, and then small group instruction Monday through Thursday, and we'll get into the details about that as well. And then additional synchronous meetings may include active lessons from specialists, and so in art, we would be drawing together, we'd be making together. Phy-Ed might be like actively working out together during these, creating together. SPED EL services as well, or it could be teacher office hours or end of the day check-in. Again, this time we want to be as active as possible and a lot of engagement. There shouldn't be a lot of sitting and getting. So in order to make those 2 things happen, we need more of a structured schedule. We need to ensure that students aren't scheduled to be in the same place at one time and that everybody is getting access to the students to provide the rich education that they have. So I'm going to ask you, maybe you want to pause on this, but this is a teacher example schedule. This is nobody's schedule in specific, but it has been seen by the principals and approved by the principals, but here's kind of an idea of what it would look like. Keep in mind, as you're about to pause, that the timing isn't necessarily proportional here. So again, just reviewing, Monday through Thursday, you're seeing those live group interactions, and then you're seeing some prep time. We're seeing some meetings. We kind of put in some just example meetings. And then Friday is a little bit more open for both you and the student. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. So on the schedule here, you see about 2.5 to 3 hours of live direct content with students. It may vary because you may not have 4 small groups in your class. Maybe your class is not big enough. And then also the variation might be, you might want to host end of the day office hours. But it looks like a big portion of your day. It's actually about 2.5 to 3 hours delivering this instruction. Then we just want to dive in and make clear what you're seeing with the small groups. So it's a lot for students to remember what time to log in for small groups. So we want to make sure that Group A knows that they log in at the same time each day. But you as a teacher are going to switch between delivering math small group instruction and reading small group instruction. Now, the complication with that is that students might not be in the same small group for math as they would be for language arts, but we're really trying to prioritize caregivers and families, and just switching up A day and B day, it's just too much. And again, these are opportunities. They don't have to necessarily attend, but we want to make sure that students have the opportunity to attend as much as possible. We'd also recommend, just going back to this, that the students who are least likely to sign on to again in the day, that you would keep them in that group A after the morning meeting. And so if they just remember, I have to be on at 9:00 a.m., that's the only time I remember, and then you keep that group that has the least amount of support or the least likely to sign back on later in the day for their small group. Now let's talk about prep. I've tried to change the schedule a little bit here to kind of be a little bit more proportional on the amount of prep you have. And so I'll talk about this again, but delivering instruction at a distance, online learning takes 2 to 3 times more planning time than it would for face-to-face instruction. And so in this model, as you see here, and that again is with like kind of plugged in meetings from 2:30 to 3:30 each day, you would have about 4 hours of prep Monday through Thursday and 6 hours of prep on Friday. Again, everything might vary a little bit depending on buildings, but we've talked to all the principals about what takes so much time. And we've talked to the distance learning teachers. You have to design the multimedia. You have to take what you did in the classroom, transfer it, and make it rich content. You have to find images online. You have to design the activities. You have to give feedback to students, which we'll talk about. And then there's just a lot of communication. But I want to pause on the notion of prep. If anybody was like, wow, we're getting all of this prep, or if anybody's saying, look at all the prep elementaries are getting. If the requirement is that you're delivering your large group instruction asynchronously, you can consider some of that prep time instructional time. It's just that you have to design that instruction, if that makes any sense. Next, let's look at a student example. Again, we just randomly made this up, but it's kind of based on the schedule you saw with the parent before, or the teacher before, excuse me. And so the student would wake up, ideally, get ready for the day, get ready to learn, put their stuff together. They would have that morning meeting every day. Then we'd have some independent work time until they got into their small group instruction. Lunch, and really encouraging that active brain break. This student, for example, receives EL small group instruction, and so every single day they'd have that small group meet. And then you see plugged in is the specialist meeting times. And so something to note here is that, for instance, this student is offered 4 live meetings on Wednesday and Monday. And that's going to happen, right? I mean, there's just no way to perfectly plan all of this. There's a lot of opportunities there for that person to jump on and engage. But again, they don't have to come to everything, but we want to give them as many opportunities to engage in the learning as possible. There might be some days that students only have 2 live meetings. That'll be okay, as long as we try to average out to 3 each day to give students some time to connect, because connecting is so important, and we'll talk about that more. All right. What I just shared was a lot. There was a lot of details. I have more to say and more to kind of cover, but I want to just, if you want to pause this, if you're watching with a colleague, if you want to just jot some notes down, some anxieties, some questions, anything that you are thinking or reflecting on when you see this, let's take a moment to do so. All right. If you're seeing this slide, that means that you have unpaused your video and that you are ready to dive into the second part of this presentation, and that's distance learning effective practices. This list of 10 is adapted from a great article on the Cult of Pedagogies on 9 ways that online learning is different than face-to-face learning. Number one, we're going to talk about, and you'll hear again in other presentations, is collaboration is key. And I'm talking about teacher to teacher collaboration here. Sharing ideas, sharing lessons, sharing the workload too. And that you don't have to create every activity. And you'll see that in the activities library. You can share, hey, you're going to take unit 1, you're going to take week 2, however you want to break it up. Please do so. Please share, oh, I found this amazing activity. I think it would be great for this ELO. Sharing the struggles. I thought I had this down, but I need some feedback. What am I doing wrong here? Or like, what doesn't making sense? Please, collaboration is even more important when we move to a distance learning. And so also keeping those meetings sacred between you and your peers or grade level peers. 2, we've already talked about this, but I want to talk about why whole group content is delivered via flipped or asynchronous or recorded lesson. This, number one, ensures access and that we're not requiring students, and we don't want to require students to be on at any certain point in time. Remember, if we do go distance learning, these are not students who opted into distance learning. This is just the whole group. And so we need to ensure that they always have access to the content, to the grade level content. Again, and also it's sustainability. If a student is out because they're sick or something happens to their family, then they have time to catch up because they can go back and re-watch your activities and re-watch your learning. That's all recorded right there. Also, it allows your students to re-watch your content as much as possible if they need more chances to understand, and it allows their families or their caregivers to engage in their education as they can watch the content as well. Number 3, live sessions should be active and engaging. We talked about this before, but it should really focus on community building. There isn't a whole lot of reason to sit and get in a live meeting. It's a lot of work to get everybody in the same place at the same time if the content could have been a video and it could have been delivered a bit more flexibly. So number 4, consider the cognitive load. Prior to this, if students were engaging in Seesaw in your classroom, it was normally in like a breakout or centers activity, or maybe you were able to give them very clear instructions on what you wanted them to do or document within Seesaw. Now they're going to be going on a Seesaw independently, and they're going to be navigating this platform and trying to figure out what it is that their teacher wants them to do. And so we're trying to keep our Seesaw practices as consistent as possible and reducing the amount of time that it takes to navigate through to find the activities, and using our icons and pictures to guide students through as well. So what does this look like for students? First, we would launch at the beginning at 9 a.m. We're going to be going over some of the activities that they'll be doing for the day. Then students go and look for feedback, and 3, they go complete their activities. So to go a little bit deeper, we have our morning meeting, we do our community building, we have our interactive session, and then the last 3 to 4 minutes, I'm going to go over what it is we want students to do for the day. I'm going to check for student understanding. Is everybody understanding what they need to do? Does anybody have any questions? Great. And then if I'm noticing patterns of students not understanding what they need to do in Seesaw or not completing those activities, maybe I'll meet with them in their small group or try to connect with them to ensure that they understand what it is they need to do and are responsible for within Seesaw. So then if I'm a student, I'm going to go first to the work I did yesterday in my journal. What did my teacher have feedback for me with? What are they saying? What do I need to work on? Some teachers might decide later on that they want to send work back for students to redo or to reconsider or to iterate as they're working on it. And then as a student, once I've checked that feedback, redone all those activities, I'm going to check my new activities. And this goes into that cognitive load. And if we're all kind of using the same Seesaw practices, if our lessons are delivered through the activities tab, and there's a whole training on that in the next recording, that helps me know what I have left to do. It's essentially like my planner. And if I'm a student and I see this message right here, great job, there are no activities waiting for your response, I know that I've completed what my teacher wanted me to complete for the day, or teachers, I should say, because there's specialists, there's EL specialists, there's SPED specialists. Next, content needs to be simplified and slowed down. The amount that we fit into classes before, the live, it cannot be directly transferred online. It's a whole different modality. Students are experiencing this content generally independently with videos from you. Online learning talks a lot about chunking content and finding the right chunk. And we have a lot less control of the environment in which students are experiencing this content. Pair that with Zaretta Hammond, who has this amazing book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, and she talks about how to use brain-based strategies to help students comprehend information. So I'm going to go over the strategy Ignite, Chunk, Chew, Review. So we ignite the brain to learn. Again, the student might be sitting in the same spot they watch Netflix or do Legos, and now you're asking them to engage in this online learning. So how can you cue the brain to pay attention? Maybe it's a short video to let them know we're going to be learning about shapes today. Maybe it's a quote, a puzzle, or even a same chime that you use every time that you start your Seesaw lessons. Then we chunk. We want to feed the brain right-sized pieces of information. Know that working memory is small, especially in online learning. And so when you're giving a video, and this is something that's different about Seesaw now, you don't have to give it all in one shot. Within the activities, you can record multiple small videos and ask students to connect it to their knowledge before you're moving on to a new chunk. And so really finding that right chunk. Seesaw only allows you to record 5 minutes within the platform, and I think that's a great stopping point for any videos with elementary students who don't have as much independent learning skills, wouldn't stop the video when they needed to, come back if they needed to. It's a lot for the brain at 5 minutes, and then move on to an activity before you go back to a video. And then chew, help the brain process the content. So you've given them this new content, and now we want to give them some time to think about it. Hammond talks about giving unstructured think time. Ask them to draw, write, or verbally reflect, or just pause and think about what they just experienced before you jump into an activity. When you do jump into those activities, we're thinking about those cognitive routines, which if you look at those bullets there, that is thinking maps. So those thinking dispositions that we have. Some more chew activities would be talk to learn. Talking is so important, getting that dialogic talk out of your brain, sharing your ideas through verbal communication, and then hearing feedback on that verbal communication is so core to learning, and we don't want to lose that. And there's a lot of ways to do that within Seesaw, asking the students to record, giving them feedback via a recorded message. They could storify the content, create it into some sort of story. We create those graphic organizers or some sort of non-linguistic representation of their thinking. Could be drawing a picture, wordplay, humor, rich activities to engage in independently. And then we review. And Hammond and brain-based research says that if we do not apply new learning or return back to that new learning within 24 hours, we lose a lot of it. And so any opportunities to rehearse and repeat. I don't think that the information I presented to you is probably startling in any way, but it is a process to move things from your face-to-face classroom online. And so if you can use Ignite, Chunk, Chew, Review as your process in thinking about how to design these Seesaw activities, it could help you. Number 6, we're going to focus on the core tools. The internet is a wild place, man, and there are so many different tools. There are tons of apps that you might be thinking, ooh, I want to include this, I want to include that. Until you and your students are proficient on Seesaw and Teams and you have a good flow, focus in. Seesaw is a rich learning tool, and so I hope that you can find ways to use the activities and functionalities within Seesaw before kind of reaching out and grabbing other tools. And in addition, it's a lot for parents to remember and students to remember other passwords and how to navigate to these other areas. Prioritize engagement. And engagement, I'm talking about more holistically, the things that engage students. One is creation. Seesaw is a creation tool. So we don't want them to be sitting and getting. We want them to be making, doing, making videos, creating, drawing as they're figuring out math problems, performing for you. The next is engagement in the content, and really be thinking about what are the different ways, what are the different inroads to this content that I can give students, and then connection. Elementary teachers are so core to a student's experience in school. I remember all of my elementary teachers. You are maternal and paternal characters in their lives. They want to see videos of you. They want to hear your voice. And knowing that they are still connected to you and that they have access to you is a form of engagement. Online learning takes a lot of motivation to stay engaged, and so we need to provide as many opportunities for engagement to keep the motivation high, especially if the students don't have the structures at home to provide that motivation for them. Number 8, feedback is more valuable than grades. If I submit this seesaw activity to you and you say you got a 4 out of 5, great. I don't know what that means, and I don't know how to improve based on that. And so formative, frequent, and specific feedback, it could be the verbal feedback that you record via Seesaw, it could be a comment. Seesaw has a like feature. Again, thank you for liking my work. However, how does that help me improve? Feedback takes time though, and so you don't have to give feedback on every assignment, but enough feedback so that I know how to do better next time or what you want to see more of from me. Number 9, streamlining communication for families and caregivers. And this was a piece of feedback we got from the spring, is that families were overwhelmed, especially if you have more than one student in the district and teachers are communicating in different ways or they're communicating a lot. Aim for clarity and consistency. It's okay to kind of let some of the non-needed information, some of that fluffy, nice information kind of fall to the wayside so that they can really focus in on what exactly do you want from me? What exactly do I need to do to support my students, my kids this week in their learning? And that might be a conversation you want to have with your administration, with your grade level. How can we be consistent as a group? And then the last one is build digital literacy now. And we have this gift of time that is, we are not in distance learning now or yet. And so how can we practice using Seesaw and Teams so that if we had to switch to distance learning, we would be ready? And to focus on that too, here are some tools to introduce. Thinking about all the different tools within Seesaw, just navigating Seesaw in general, and then with Teams. And these are just the tools. These are not the skills or the knowledge needed to function within a distance learning format. And so I'm always going to leave you with this idea based on what you saw today, based on Seesaw, Teams, and the iPad. What other skills or routines will students need to know or be able to do in order to function in online class? And most importantly, how can we practice those now? If we never go distance learning, then they are just going to be more independent learners. They're going to be better at Seesaw, and none of those things are necessarily bad. But how can you practice those right now in your classroom? I am closing this presentation now. I want to say thank you. I know it was a lot. You're doing amazing. I'm open to feedback, and if I'm leaving out details, know that there will be more information on policies and procedures and those type of things if, in fact, we go distance learning from administration as well, too.